Hello, Pastor Bryon, back with you once again to talk about the books of the Bible study. Now, we've made our way through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Bible, oftentimes called the books of Moses. And the key leader throughout these 5 books of the Bible, through Exodus to Deuteronomy, a leader has arisen by the name of Moses. And we've seen him in a lot of instances as a leader. But a lot of times, this leadership is almost in response or reaction to something else going on. It's leadership in light of complaints and rebellions or some sort of issues coming up. He doesn't seem to be the take charge kind of guy. And many of you, when you ask me questions, when you send me comments or questions, as we've asked you guys to, many of you have commented about poor Moses. He seems to be getting a lot of blame along the way for the things that are coming up from the people, from other leaders, even from his brother and sister. There's a lot of blame on this poor guy. And quite a few have commented, he doesn't seem like he's being treated fair. And I wanted to just talk about this for a moment, because in the Bible and amongst God's people, for leaders, fairness is not what's number one. That's not most important for the leaders. And I can tell you, as someone who is in ministry leadership, that is a hard pill to swallow and to come to terms with. That fairness and being treated fair is not what our job is all about. All right, our job, and this is what Moses makes very clear, our job is to do what's right. To do what's right. That's what defines a leader amongst God's people, is to do what's right. Now, there's different personalities that we see in Moses, and from his protege, Joshua, the great examples of different personalities and different styles. Joshua is like a take charge kind of guy. We read immediately in Joshua chapter 4 as they're just starting out to cross that Jordan into the land, and the people were already in awe of him, it says in Joshua chapter 4. That they were in awe of him, and it says just as they were in awe of Moses. Now that means that they had reverence for Joshua, just like they had reverence for Moses. The only difference is that Moses took decades to build that leadership credibility that Joshua seems to have had right away. Now that could be built in because Joshua was Moses' protege, variety of reasons, but he was more of a take charge kind of different personalities, different leadership styles. Yes, but both of them, all God's leaders will want to do what's right, all right, to be a good leader. And so it's not about fairness. I want to make sure that's very clear here. That leadership amongst God's people will oftentimes seem unfair. In fact, we see Moses blamed for so many things. He seems to be a lightning rod for issues. And it doesn't seem fair. Now, I can tell you from just my personal experience. Now, I've been in ministry leadership for about 21 years. 21 years. I'm so old, I just realized. This video is a little painful for me suddenly. Oh, it takes a downturn. But anyway, my ego aside, my youthful ego aside, about 19 of those years have been professional ministry, vocational ministry, from mega churches, huge mega churches, down to tiny, brand new church plants, ministering from babies all the way up to senior citizens, funerals and weddings, many different types of ministries, a lot of different types, different churches, different organizations, but I specialize, and over all this, I specialize in discipleship, helping people grow to be like Christ, in particular, multi-generational discipleship with families and whatnot. How do you work in an environment that where you have multiple generations and need them to all be moving in the same direction to be like Christ? How do you do that? That's what I love to do. That's my passion. And so each year I continue learning, continue growing in this vein. And I got to tell you, one of the hardest things for me to come to terms with was that I was going to be blamed a lot. And I say often, unfairly, I would say. Now, that's for God to judge. I'm not going to dwell on that right now, but I'm going to say, well, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, no one from our church, all right? So, just, wait, are you talking about the so-and-sos? No, I'm not talking about the so-and-sos, okay? No one from our church. A little disclaimer there. But there was one kid in one of the ministries that I worked with, and this kid seemed to be very irritable a lot. Quick to get angry, lash out at leaders, other kids. And I would talk to the parents about it, and they just blamed it on just youthful indiscretion and whatnot. Now the grandma, believe it or not, the grandma let it slip. Actually, the kid had a behavioral disorder called oppositional defiant disorder. It's ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. Now, if you're not familiar with ODD, it's in the vein of, say, ADHD and ADD. These are kids that need the church just as much as any other kids, but they just need a little bit extra effort. And it's actually very helpful if the church leadership knows about it. As I approached the parents about, this would be helpful for us to know, come to find out, the parents didn't want anyone to know that their kid was ODD. They felt like their kid would be labeled a problem child. Now, if you're not familiar with ODD, basically, it's a kid who has trouble managing their emotions. They're trying to control their world through anger and irritability, lashing out, and basically, it's really rough, especially at home for parents. Usually, and they can compartmentalize this behavior as well in the way they try to control things. Sometimes it's specific types of environments they're trying to control. A lot of times it starts at home, can also extend to school, sports teams, church ministries, as I saw. But it's not an uncommon disorder here in America. But it's something that's very helpful to know, because these kids usually diagnosed before age 8. But they blatantly are disobedient and disrespectful and confrontational with authority figures. Now, the cause of this is unknown, but we do know that it seems to be a mix of nature and nurture, biological, social, psychological factors in here. All right, so it's not just one thing to blame, not just one thing to treat, and there is no known cure or real, there isn't a medical treatment, but there is a lot of behavioral treatments. And so that's why it's good to know this for a ministry, because these kids need clear rules and consequences, clear boundaries to explain, what behaviors are expected, what are the consequences if you break those, be very clear about the consequences and consistently enforce these rules. And these things can be very difficult in ministry because if you have a lot of volunteers, not all volunteers are consistent in the way that they handle kids and situations. This is especially problematic if the parents don't want anyone to know that their kid has this. And it's important for the adults to stay cool and level-headed. Physical activity can be very good to help redirect the kid's focus. But simple words like no and stop can actually just set these kids off. And so it's very good to know these kids, bargaining with them is not advisable. They need to be held accountable. And their child and I actually built a great rapport, very clear consequences with a kid. And the child always understood when they broke the consequences, broke the rules, the consequences followed. And actually, this child and I had a great relationship. Unfortunately, the parents, they did not appreciate their kid receiving consequences for their behavior. The parents, like many ODD parents, ODD children, can be very laid back, can think that any consequences are unfair, etc. And this is the case of these parents. And so they blamed the ministry, and in particular the ministry leaders. The snacks are too sugary, which was not the case. And so then they blamed that there's not enough games and activities. And then the complaint came that there's the games wound their kid up too much. And that was the problem. Or we heard that the lessons are too boring. And then we heard the lessons are too exciting. And then we heard the leaders are too involved in their family. And then heard the leaders didn't care. You see where this is going. There was no responsibility on the parents, on the family. It was just, got to blame the leaders and the ministry. And eventually, believe it or not, the family left the church. Who knew? Who saw that coming? And again, believe it or not, they blame the leaders, particularly this guy. It just comes with the job. Unfortunately, people never knew. All they knew was the blame. And that hurts. I'll be honest, it hurts. But my job is not to be treated fair, but to do what's right. And so, as much as this does hurt, as much as this does, you can say that's an issue. it's an issue everywhere in life, right? Think about what's going on right now with COVID-19. I mean, people want to blame the president or our governor, and endless, blame to go around for the leaders who are doing everything wrong. Depending on what political party you are, you'll either blame the president or the governor of Michigan, or someone, who knows. But it's a consistent thing, and the important thing to keep in mind that what we don't see in Moses in biblical leadership is that it's not about control either. It's not about fairness, and it's not about control either. It's about preparing God's people for life, for God's agenda, God's plan, God's purposes, whatever it is God wants to do in your life, in your community, in our church, in the world, whatever God wants to do in history. That's the job of the leader. So do what's right and prepare you for what God is doing. And that means that we're going to do things as leaders in different ways, in different roles. But all in all, we have the same job of doing what's right. So I hope this helps you sort of see Moses in a little bit different light. He wasn't treated fairly, but that's just what we do as people, as humans. We blame the leaders. We don't take responsibility. Nothing's changed after thousands and thousands of years. And as a part of a church, maybe keep that in mind. All right, maybe put that in your back pocket. But you know what? I'm not going to be so quick to blame the leaders. Take a look at myself. Not saying anything about anyone. Want to keep my job. But just keep it in mind is all I'm saying. But no, you guys are absolutely right. Moses wasn't treated fairly. He oftentimes got the short end of the stick. But he was a leader, a wise leader and a faithful leader, because he sought to do what was right. I hope this has all been food for thought, and that you too, in your own way, in your own life, pursue leadership. And make sure that you pursue doing what is right. All right, God bless, and we'll talk to you again later.